Thank you, Somshila. Talking about corneal ectatic disorders, the current options, financial disclosures, none. Corneal ectatic disorders comprise a group of non-inflammatory conditions, and the most common is keratoconus. The next you see in your clinic is keratoglobus, pellucid marginal corneal degeneration, or the iatrogenic keratectasia post-laser refractive surgery. We are all familiar with the clinical appearance of these cases, and a lot of times you have to take the help of corneal topography to be able to pick up the ectatic disorder in the earlier stage, whether it's the Placido-based or a scanning slit or a shine flood imaging technique. And the pellucid has a slightly different appearance with a thinning in the inferior part of the cornea. Keratoglobus is a generalized thinning. In the management option, when we look at these patients in the early stage, when the patient has very early ectasia, often these cases, the astigmatism is less than 4 diopters. You can still manage them with glasses, although the clinical point would that even with the glasses, the patient sometimes cannot improve up to 6/6. They always complain that the last line doesn't look very sharp. The next option would be management using contact lenses. If the astigmatism is still less, you can manage it with soft toric lenses. These days you have the Kerasoft lenses as well. Otherwise, most commonly we use the rigid gas permeable lenses, notably the Roske design. And in certain cases with DC-centered cones, you can have to resort to using piggyback lenses where you put in a soft contact lens and then put a RGP lens on top. You have the newer hybrid contact lenses which has a central RGP and a peripheral soft skirt. And in very advanced cases, you can go in for the scleral contact lenses where the contact lens basically sits on the sclera and the central part vaults over the cornea without having any touch, and it has a fluid filled. The other treatment that's become very popular and very important is cross-linking, and this is a procedure whereby you can increase the physical strength of the cornea by making it stiffer, and thereby it can arrest further progression of keratoconus. And in this case, you soak the cornea with riboflavin and expose the eye to ultraviolet A light for a duration of 30 minutes to, now it's come down to almost like 5 minutes, using increasing energy, and that helps achieve the stiffening of the cornea. Clinically, you should select cases where the corneal thickness is a minimum of 400 microns or more. The K-value, the maximum K-value is less than 58 to 60 diopters. There is absence of corneal scarring. And most important is there should be, before you do the treatment, that the patient you should be able to visually rehabilitate the patient. Otherwise, there is no benefit of doing the cross-linking, because if once you do the cross-linking, you still cannot do anything for the patient to see better. When cross-linking is done, well, how do you see the outcome? You do see some changes in the cornea. The most commonly described is the zone of haze that comes between 200 to 250 microns, and sometimes in diffuse light you can see these crisscross lines in the cornea which may look like pseudo-Vogt striae, but they don't disappear on applying pressure to the cornea. And on OCT you can see the same haze that develops at a depth of 200 to 250 microns, and that's kind of an evidence that cross-linking has taken place. And if you do a topography, you will find that in certain cases there is some amount of flattening that's achieved after the cross-linking procedure. The next thing you can do for these patients is the implantation of intracorneal rings. Intacs is one such device. And again here, it's good for early to moderate keratoconus. The K-value should be less than 58 to 60 diopters. There shouldn't be any corneal scarring. And ideally, the astigmatism should be within 7 to 8 diopters. Greater than that, sometimes the visual improvement is not something that the patient desires. And these basically add up to the corneal volume, and by stretching the cornea, they achieve a certain amount of corneal flattening. Just to give you a clinical example where you see the patient has a single ring segment placed in the inferior cornea, and you can see the post-operative topography where the patient's visual acuity unaided from 5/60 has improved to 6/18, and the best corrected vision is almost 6/6. The next option that we can consider is implantation of phakic IOL. This is not in all patients with ectasia, but a subset of patients where the patients have stable corneal condition. The astigmatism is less than 6 diopters, and with the best spectacle corrected visual acuity of 6/12 or better. This is the most important part, that with spectacles the patient should be able to see 6/12 or better, and they should meet up with all the other criteria which are required for implantation of the phakic IOL. And in such cases, what we have commonly used in our patients is the STAR toric ICL, which allows good correction of astigmatism as well. Just to give you a representative case, a patient with -9 with -3 cylinder, and he could improve to 612 and had good endothelial cell count, good anterior chamber depth, and we went ahead, did a toric ICL, and you can see the post-operative refraction on the auto-ref, which shows just +1, refractive error, although the K values remain the same, and this patient improved to almost 6/6 unaided. The next option is doing some form of corneal surgery. When the keratoconus or the ectasia becomes very advanced and the patient is unable to wear contact lens or not able to tolerate the contact lens, and you don't have any other option, and there are no scars involving the Descemet's membrane, in this situation, we should consider doing a lamellar corneal surgery. And the big bubble technique described by Anwar has become quite popular, and this involves basically injection of air at a depth at about 80 to 90% depth of the corneal stroma, and as you inject the air, you find that the air separates the Descemet's from the residual stroma, and you can then excise the stroma and left with a bare Descemet's membrane, onto which you can put in a donor tissue from where you separated the Descemet's. And that's the post-operative appearance. The advantage is that you can use any tissue from the eye bank with poor endothelial cell count, so it improves the utilization of the donor tissue from the eye bank. And in the post-eye, because you have not sacrificed the host endothelium, the risk of rejection is less, so the long-term survival of the graft is better. And in fact, a report from the American Academy where they reviewed the literature, and they came out with this paper in 2011, and they compared DALK with PK, and they found that the lamellar keratoplasty is equivalent to penetrating keratoplasty in terms of the visual outcome, superior to penetrating keratoplasty in terms of preserving the endothelium, and the risk of intraoperative complications is also less. And it's a good option that you should consider before taking patients up for corneal surgery. However, there are certain situations where a lamellar keratoplasty may not be possible, such as this. So here, if you have this situation, then you have to go in for a penetrating keratoplasty. We are all familiar with the conventional penetrating keratoplasty that we do, where a full thickness corneal button measuring about 8.5 millimeters centrally is removed, replaced with a full thickness donor tissue. However, there is always a risk of endothelial rejection, so the patients have to be put on long-term steroids, and you have to watch out for the intraocular pressure and the development of cataract. There are newer techniques wherein you can use the femtosecond laser to create shape penetrating keratoplasty, like a top hat or a mushroom or a zigzag, which allows better apposition of the graft-host junction, improves the tectonic strength, and it sometimes can result in a lower induction of astigmatism as compared to manual techniques of suturing. However, the biggest difference between the two techniques is when you do a specular microscopy, you will see a huge difference in patients who have had a DALK procedure do maintain the normal healthy endothelial cell counts, whereas with the PK you will see a gradual decline of their cell counts over a period of time. So in the management of ectatic disorders, this is the kind of approach that we take. Sometimes we use a mix and match. We may do cross-linking, and along with that you may do intacs as well, or you do a toric ICL. And sometimes you don't have a single treatment modality that works for each and every patient. Depending on the severity of ectasia, you need to decide whether you need to take a conservative approach or you need to go in and do either an implant or do a corneal replacement procedure. I would like to invite you for this meeting end of this year, which is the second meeting of the Corneal Society of India, and more information on the webpage. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.